Chapter 151 Forced March 5 Rian, I'm leaving. Explain it to Tess and Amy. Huh? Hey, Sharon. Before Rian could stop him, Sharon teleported away at an incredible speed. After a while, Amy and Tess caught up to Rian. Rian, where did Sharon go? He went ahead and moved forward just a moment ago. What the heck is he thinking? What did he say? He said he plans to trigger traps in advance using his explosion ability. He thought you wouldn't allow it, so he went alone. Of course not. Who would permit such a reckless method? Besides, since explosion is a kinetic defensive shield, it can be dangerous if it's not the right time. Yes, it was probably just to avoid hearing that from you. Amy was upset, not because Sharon acted unilaterally, but because the strategy he chose was actually the most effective judging by the outcome. However, it was too risky. In a normal situation, even if the odds were low, there might be chances of success, but in this case, no matter how high the chances were, the risk of failure had to be considered. If he fails, he'll die. That idiot. Shouting at the absent Sharon, Amy placed her hands on Rian's and Tess's shoulders. I can't do this. It's impossible to stop him, so let's help him first. Everyone stay alert. We'll follow at full speed. Amy bent her body up and initiated teleportation. A bright flash of light pierced through the water of the stream. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The upper course of the valley, which was the only path to the hideout, was completely blocked by a 20-meter high wall. At that moment, about 10 men were positioned, and Falcoa's men, who were building the encirclement, began to arrive one after another. The enemies are coming. Get ready to activate the traps. Are they much faster than we expected? We don't have enough time to activate them all. The leader clicked his tongue. He didn't know whose idea it was, but it was quite clever. As long as there was no way to avoid the trap, the strategy was to run the shortest distance and try to bypass the traps. It doesn't matter. These traps were designed to deal with hundreds of people. Even if we only activate half, it will be enough to bury four of them. The leader kept his composure until the end and gave instructions to his subordinates, but the sight of a child running alone towards them from 200 meters away left him astonished. What? Why is he alone? It seems he ran ahead because he was in a hurry. The leader didn't believe it because it wasn't out of the question, but the moment he realized that his enemy was alone, he had an unusual feeling acting in his mind. He was beginning to think that it would be a waste to activate the trap. It's a psychological warfare. It would be a waste to use a long-range trap to catch only one person. So what should we do? Should we go out and fight? What do you mean? What should we do? Just activate the traps quickly. Are you stupid? That's exactly what he's thinking. He may be risking his life, but they underestimated us too much. Capturing even one of their two magicians would change things. Don't hold back. Understood. Hey, we've already started. Everyone, get ready. Sharon stared at the wall, blocking the valley. About 10 enemies were tightening their bows, aiming at the sky. Arrow attacks. Sharon was puzzled. It was almost impossible for only 10 archers to reach a person at a distance of 100 meters. However, the enemies released their arrows without hesitation, and Sharon stopped running to look up at the sky. They seemed like ordinary arrows, except each one had a tip of a different color. It's a magical projectile. Sharon, who had just teleported, instinctively retreated. If he hadn't seen these magical projectiles in the ruins of Kerugo, he would have been taken by surprise. Sharon, at that moment, Sharon stopped retreating upon hearing Amy's voice from behind. Due to how quickly she had arrived unexpectedly, Sharon could sense how anxious Amy had been. But Sharon didn't change his mind, trapped in a situation where it was neither possible to advance nor retreat. The magical projectile fell to the ground. A powerful explosion erupted, shaking the valley as a thick cloud of smoke enveloped Sharon. Sharon realized their strategy. They planned to block his view and then finish them off with a trap. Amy, don't come. Even if Sharon hadn't said anything, Amy couldn't approach. This was because, in places where the smoke didn't spread, enormous vibrations could be seen with the naked eye, occurring over the valley as expected. Terrifying mechanical devices resembling catapults were revealed along the cliff. Although they had wheels, they were large enough for several people to push against them to move. Now is the time. Unleash everything. Following the leader's orders, Falcoa's subordinates activated the device. Enormous rocks were thrown into the valley with the help of levers. The rocks were of immense size, enough to fill the V-shaped cross-section of the valley, and then some, judging by their power. It wasn't a trap created to block a small number of people. It was a secret weapon designed to annihilate enemies on a final battlefield. Sharon, Amy shouted frantically, but it was already too late. The huge rocks sank one by one into the cloud of smoke. Amy heard a hallucinatory screeching and crushing sound created by her imagination, but the very next moment, a powerful explosion dispersed that hallucination. The lingering smoke over the valley dispersed, revealing Sharon enveloped in a sphere of light. Photon explosion. The sphere of light glowed intensely with Sharon at its center. The spiritual zone, with a maximum diameter of 20 meters, was even larger than the rocks, as that immense light rampaged wildly at an incredible speed. Onlookers felt as if they were about to go blind. The light, laden with mass, exerted all its force in an attempt to counteract the momentum, but the boulders are also posed a formidable weight against the opposition. The rocks, violently trembling as they pierced through the photon explosion, seemed as though they would crush Sharon to death at any moment. But by the time the rocks were halfway through, they shattered into dozens of pieces, and from there, Sharon's photon explosion began to dominate the rocks. As the number of medium-sized rocks exponentially increased, a series of explosions ensued, smaller, even smaller. Sharon kept unleashing photon cannons until the rocks turned into dust. When the object that used to be a rock reached Sharon, it was nothing more than tiny particles. Even those were swept away by the cycle of light. The rocks took only 2 seconds to crash to the ground, exactly the time it took to disintegrate into dust. Thousands of events compressed within human perception, creating an optical illusion as if a massive explosion had occurred. The dust scattered in all directions and settled on the ground. The eerie sound of the wind persisted in the valley. Falcao's lackeys couldn't comprehend what had just happened. A flash of light, and the rocks turned to dust. That's all they could see. Sharon crossed the dust-covered stream and stared fixedly at the fortress. He saw the lackeys who had activated the trap quickly retreat. The leader realized that something had gone terribly wrong. He had been living in the battlefield for over 10 years, but he had never heard of such magic, not even rumors. Damn it, who is that kid? Leader, what should we do? Prepare the magic projectile. Fire. As the lackeys quickly separated arrowheads and placed magic projectiles, Sharon, who was fiercely staring at them, concentrated his mental power in front of his eyes. A photon sphere was born with a pop, absorbing the light around it and vibrating powerfully. Leader, over there, that's dangerous. Someone who had previously experienced Sharon's magic at the Royal Tavern shouted to the leader. Indeed, what the leader saw was baffling. Light compressed into something larger than a human face. Hurry up, quickly assemble the magic projectiles. The movements of the subordinates became faster, but the magic was faster. A line of light was drawn between Sharon and the fortress, as if a flash of light had suddenly appeared. Boom! When the photon cannon crashed directly into the iron door, it produced a deafening metallic sound. The lackeys clinched and frowned as they assembled magic projectiles. The impact was so powerful that even the wall shook. Even after the magic disappeared, the iron door hummed. Is it broken? Check it. The lackey descended the stairs connected to the ground and inspected the fortress door. The thick metal plate was bent but not destroyed. The subordinate cheered as if he felt that even this achievement was a victory. The door is intact. Good, now it's our turn to attack. Tess looked at her friends and spoke as the photon cannon's attack failed. Magic can't bring down the door. Rian, let's climb the wall. To win a siege, you must succeed at one or two of two things. The first is to destroy the door with siege weapons or magic and push your troops through. But if you can't break down the door, scaling the wall and eliminating the enemies is another option. And that was the duty of a swordsman like Tess and Rian. All right, it's better if we climbed. Rian secured his straight sword to his back to move more easily. But just as the two were about to start, leaning the upper parts of their bodies forward, Amy stopped them. Wait, hold on. There's no time to waste. We need to attack before the enemies regroup. Now is our chance. Tess' judgment was correct. Amy, specializing in fire magic, was weak against the impact, and Sharon's photon cannon was also ineffective against the thick iron door. But Amy knew Sharon had another weapon. Moreover, it was the most effective magic in this situation. All right, Sharon, we'll take care of it. Tess, who didn't understand the situation, looked at Sharon with a puzzled expression and suddenly widened her eyes. A red light extended from Sharon's body. What is that? Isn't that dangerous? Humans feel uncomfortable when they see the color red. It's because it reminds them of blood. Even Tess was apprehensive seeing the eerie red light, so one could only imagine how much more alarmed the enemies must be. Later, what on earth is that? Sharon fired a beam of red light forward. The laser beam hit the iron door so quickly it could be called an instant burning. The surface. Ew, what's that? The subordinates who had already experienced the power of the photon cannon took fearful steps back. However, no shockwave or loud noise was expected. The leader, inspecting the door from beneath the fortress, regained his confidence. The current magic was simply shining on the iron door. It had no discernible power. Good, now's the time. Prepare the magic projectile, including the subordinates who had returned from the trap. There were more than 40 people. With this number, they could have devastated the area around Chiron with a barrage of magic projectiles. As soon as all subordinates finished aiming, the leader lowered his hand and shouted, "Fire the, huh? Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." At that moment, the fortress wall began to vibrate abruptly. Not only the leader, but also the subordinates who were about to release the bowstrings looked at each other in surprise. A subordinate who had leaned over to inspect the door from outside the fortress wall spoke with a trembling voice. Leader, that's... The iron door shook violently. Finally, the vibration that began at the iron door spread throughout the fortress wall, shaking the structure's foundations. Faced with something they had never seen before, Falcao's subordinates could only be horrified. The metal plate where the laser touched began to boil, and bubbles began to rise. as if they were air bubbles. Then the fortress wall trembled, as if it were about to be torn apart. And finally, with an explosion, the iron door swung open. End of chapter 151. Chapter 152, Forced March 6. The leader's eye bulged in disbelief. Not even a formidable siege weapon could pierce the iron gates. Damn it, shoot directly at them. Instructions were issued that were almost like a temporary measure. As the castle gate had already been breached, if they couldn't stop them here, the battle would quickly tilt in their favor. The subordinates aware of this also aimed directly at Sharon and pulled their bows. Fire. 40 magic projectiles were fired with all their might and flew towards Sharon. Even after seeing the arrows approaching rapidly, Sharon didn't move. This was because escaping the explosion range with just the teleportation radius was impossible. However, spatial shift was a different story. The moment the 40 arrows fell, Sharon's body turned into a flash of light and soared into the sky. Kaboom! The sound of spatial shift echoed as a powerful explosion destroyed the place where Sharon had stood. Tess looked at the explosion incredulously. The thunderous echo made them feel like they were in the center of the battlefield. Sharon, the magnitude of the explosion was enormous, enough to shake one's senses. Therefore, no one knew that Sharon had used spatial movement. However, Amy was an exception. It said that for archers, the sound of arrows being shot is the clearest, and for swordsmen, the clash of swords is heard most clearly. Therefore, as a mage, Amy could clearly hear the unique sound of spatial movement even amidst the roar of the explosion. Sharon is safe. Let's go into. Amy moved forward, cutting through the smoke, as expected. When they left the explosion site, they saw Sharon standing in front of the fortress. Spatial shift bends light, so it looked as if he was rising into the sky when it was actually an optical illusion. In reality, Sharon wasn't ascending into the sky, but bending space. Moreover, such an illusion could only be observed from a distance, and if seen up close, it would seem to suddenly disappear. This was why mages used sound to determine if spatial movement was being used. Ha ha ha, it's over, completely finished. There's no trace left. There's nothing to fear anymore. Guys, get ready to charge. The Falcoa men put down their bows and grabbed their weapons. Now that the mage displaying the most threatening power was dead, they had nothing to fear. Tess, who was watching this, tilted her head clearly. Sharon was standing in front of the iron gate like the Grim Reaper, but the enemies were applauding. What's wrong with them? They didn't hear the sound of spatial teleportation like I did. They think Sharon is dead. The Falcoa men didn't take long to correct their mistake. As Sharon slowly retreated and appeared outside the fortress wall's blind spot, everyone was surprised as if they had seen a ghost. Leader, there! The leader's face turned red. Sharon, who should have been torn apart by the bombardment, was looking defiantly at the castle wall. You bastard. Before launching a large-scale siege, Sharon decided to give their enemies one last chance. Release Jay's sister, then we'll leave. The leader looked at Sharon without understanding. Leave after causing all this chaos? Where to? Do you think you'll leave? Is this some kind of amusement park that charges an entrance fee? Do you think we'll let you go? The true face of a siege begins when the gates are breached. Do you know how much effort it took to build that magic circle you ruined? You can pay for it even with your life. Well, torture you until you beg to die. I don't want to get involved in a pointless fight. It was you who made the mistake from the beginning. I wish you'd stop now. Ha 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 ha. Hat. Do you want us to stop? Do you know who we are? We are the pirate mercenary band that lives and dies on the battlefield. Guys, let's go, kill them. Wah, the subordinates raised their swords and cheered. Seeing that words were useless, Sharon sighed and walked towards the fortress wall's blind spot. How considerate of you to come yourself. Guys, get down there right now, huh? At that moment, the leader stopped speaking. In an instant, a scene flashed through his mind. It was a strange magic that turned falling rocks into dust. Can they really say that the walls here are harder than rocks? Hey, wait a minute. The leader rushed up the stairs and checked the fortress gate. As expected, Sharon was going through the metal gate and pushing it down. Hey, is this punk joking? This can't be possible. The leader's voice trembled with horror. He felt his face growing pale. Hey, stop doing that. No, do you know how much effort it took to build this wall? Hey, Sharon completed the magical preparation and briefly looked at the leader standing on the stairs. The leader who faced that gaze finally realized that the decision had already been made. Evacuate. Everyone jumped to the ground. The moment the leader climbed the stairs and shouted, Sharon muttered quietly, photon explosion. Kaboom! A 20-meter wide photon explosion pulsed 15 times per second. The fortress wall shook as if there had been an earthquake, and the Falcoa men lost their balance and fell. As expected, being a massive structure, it had exceptional durability. However, Sharon didn't stop the photon explosion. After all, the law of physics says that the durability of materials has a limit. If you keep hitting, eventually it will break. The iron gate made a loud metallic noise, as if it had been hit with a hammer, and cracks like lightning crossed the fortress wall. The cracks continued branching out and infiltrating the entire castle wall until the ground began to shake and signs of collapse began to appear. The leader was at a loss. He was a veteran and had quite a bit of experience in siege warfare. But although he had witnessed a destroyed fortress before, this was the first time he had seen a brute force collapse method, an entire forest. an entire fortress. Ah, okay, we lost. Stop, the leader shouted, but his voice couldn't even reach a meter due to the mass-filled photons pounding the fortress like a drum. Darn it, this can't be happening. This was really dangerous. If the fortress collapsed like that, the fate of 40 lives would have been left in God's hands. Ooh, Sharon frowned and focused on his photon explosion. He was bringing everything down around him at an alarming pace, with no acceleration or deceleration. From a vantage point where the fortress walls were visible, Tess stared at the scene without understanding. At first, part of the central part of the wall was destroyed, followed by hysterical cracks that spread along the wall. The left side seemed to sink slightly, and then the right side sank to balance it. And finally, the entire fortress collapsed. My goodness, that's a human weapon, isn't it? Rian agreed with Tess' sentiments. Until now, Sharon had tended to use magic to protect others. When he really set out to destroy something, they realized again how different the results could be even with with the same magic. It's definitely incredible. I guess I didn't fully understand Sharon either, Amy said, smiling in agreement. While combat wasn't everything for a mage, it was her pride. Sharon normally doesn't escalate things. However, when he sets his mind to it, his fighting ability itself is extremely outstanding. At this level, he could easily rank among the top of the class. Tess chuckled. She seemed to know what Amy was talking about. Certainly, she's been nurturing consciously or unconsciously. Anyhow, looks can be deceiving. Amy was genuinely pleased with Sharon's growth. At this rate, graduating together might not just be a dream. I see you followed me well. Sharon, when the storm passed, the walls had completely collapsed. While the wall built near the valley still retained some of its shape, the center was as if a huge rock had rolled over it, completely flattened. Phew, the mercenary buried in the stone groaned and writhed. Not a single person came out unscathed. Even the squad leader who had tried to stop Sharon couldn't avoid the collapse and had a broken arm, but he was so devastated that he couldn't even feel the pain. The 5 years of hard work required to build a hideout in the north passed in an instant. It can't be destroyed by a single person. The pirate mercenary band. The squad leader was startled by the sound of Sharon's approaching footsteps. Facing Sharon's intense gaze, he felt an uncontrollable wave of fear. Bring G's sister now, otherwise you won't survive. Ah, the leader covered his face unconsciously. Then his broken arm dangled and swung before his eyes. Phew. The leader, seeing his grotesquely bent arm, rolled his eyes and fainted. Sharon and his group passed the first checkpoint. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Wow, that's amazing, Sharon. Marcia had been watching Sharon's combat from a spot 200 meters away from the wall. Sitting on a spread out handkerchief on the ground, she seemed as calm as if she were in a picnic. It's sad what happened to her subordinates, but enduring such pain wasn't part of being a mercenary. She herself had lost hundreds due to politician schemes. You're very strong, but very clever at deceiving people. No, was it because you were strong that you had so much room to maneuver? She knew it. The boy had talent for magic, but she didn't expect this level of power. Most impressive was that all of Sharon's magic was applied from his own original mana pool. Unlocker. Marcia was in a good mood. She liked the fact that Sharon was strong and also appreciated that he was a hypocritical person, pretending to care about others' pain. More thrilling than anything else was the fact that, sooner or later, such a pure and beautiful child would become a black ball in her hands. You're a decade too young to catch me, kid. Marcia stretched and got up from her seat. Her bracelet glowed intensely and led her to a cliff in the north. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sharon and his group continued heading north. As most of Alcoa's men were injured at the first gate, there was no battle. This way, finding the path through the forest fell to Amy's responsibility. Running aimlessly in a natural labyrinth could easily result in losing one's sense of direction. However, this common sense did not apply to Amy. Tess, following Amy, realized she had the potential to shine in intelligence operations. Indeed, you can use red eyes in this manner. Amy's self-image memory perfectly restores a specific state at a given moment. Therefore, as long as she didn't lose consciousness, she could accurately determine the direction regardless of where she was transported. Amy, there's a mountain trail over there. As soon as Sharon spoke, Amy changed direction and left the forest. The winding mountain path led to the summit. Tess checked the terrain. Although it seemed like a while had passed, there were signs of carriages having passed by. From now on, it's their territory. In terms of a siege, we've entered their inner walls, haven't we? It was a welcomed relief for those exhausted from running through the forest, but it wasn't a situation in which they could relax yet. Even though they had decimated most of the troops, the leaders, the so-called executives, were nowhere to be seen. If we follow this path, we'll reach their hideout. Let's hold on a little longer. Amy said as if she were certain, but in reality, she wasn't sure. She simply felt the obligation as a leader to boost her friend's morale for success. Based on her self-image memory, the sum of movements and distances covered in battles indicated that they had moved approximately 12 kilometers from the starting point. In a straight line, they had advanced over 7 kilometers on the map. End of chapter 152. Chapter 153, The Second Encounter 1. It's definitely true that we were close, just 1 more kilometer left. Just as Amy was about to explain, she saw a fireball emerge from the forest, making a ferocious noise. It's an ambush. Scatter. Sharon and the group dispersed in different directions. The flame hitting the ground grew larger as it absorbed the air and then dissipated in the form of heat. A fireball. Amy, be careful. The second and third attacks came simultaneously, but Amy didn't dodge it. Instead, she took a combat stance and pierced through the fireball with an equal amount of flame strikes. Show yourself. Stop ambushing like a coward. Your skills are quite impressive. Getting this far wasn't just luck. Sharon and the group looked towards a man. Towards the mountain trail, a man emerged from the forest. He was similar in height to Rian, had a slim body emitting a sense of agility. Although he lacked eyebrows, he had a serpentine aura with his confidence and the pale impression of his slicked back hair. Who are you? Vice leader of the pirate mercenary band, Agado Freeman. Tension filled Sharon's group of the word vice captain, but on the other hand, it meant their destination was not far away. Sharon, let me handle this. When I give the signal, take Rian and Tess and head to the cliff. I can't do that. It's too dangerous. And you? Have you forgotten that you've already walked into a trap alone? Are you going to keep ignoring me like this? I'm not ignoring you. There are about 20 more people hidden in the forest. Amy had confirmed this with Spirit Zone, but that's why she wants to dismiss Sharon first. If they were held back here, they would only buy time for reinforcements at the first checkpoint. Amy, trying to somehow persuade Sharon, raised her hand and pointed at Freeman. Sharon, look at that man's weapon. It's a firearm. Sharon turned his head and took a close look. The man clearly held a weapon that was exactly like the one he had seen in the book. The magical projectile fired with a bow required replacing the arrowhead, but the weapon was especially crafted to use only magical projectiles. It's a device that loads a small amount of magical bullets and shoots them forward in terms of design. It was a kind of revolver that could continuously fire by rotating the cylinder. Do you see? You know what a firearm is, right? It can replace the bullets faster than the bow and is a direct firearm. Unlike arrows that explode upon impact, it is shot in an already activated state, making it specialized for a medium and long-range combat. Probably all the types hiding in the forest are also using that weapon. Sharon understood what Amy meant. All right, I'll leave this to you. Rian and Tess looked back with puzzled eyes. They had heard the explanation about the weapon, but it only made the situation seem more dangerous. Why would Sharon suddenly change his mind and leave Amy alone? I'll create a wall of fire to gain time and avoid their pursuit. Take the chance to make your way through. Got it, Rian. Tess, get ready. If it were Sharon's judgment, Rian could only follow suit. He didn't feel good about leaving his colleague alone, but Tess also swallowed and prepared to run because it wasn't a situation to take time to discuss. Now, go, Amy, who had finished concentrating, opened her eyes and shouted, while Sharon cleared the way, and run. Rian and Tess followed him to the left and right. As expected, sparks from the weapons flew from all directions in the forest. Amy launched a wall of fire in the form of a huge circle. The ground began to boil like porridge, and the flames that started under their feet rushed with a terrifying momentum and pierced through the forest. Then she amplified her mental strength, causing the firewall to blaze violently, obstructing the enemy's view. At the same time, Sharon grabbed Rian and Tess and initiated the teleportation. Its range was shorter than that of a high-ranking mage, but it was effective enough to suddenly vanish before the enemy's eyes. After hearing the sound of teleportation, Amy stopped casting firewall and gasped. The firewall, known as a mana-consuming spell, required continuous mental concentration to maintain. The reason it wasn't overpowered despite being powerful was that the casting cost was too high. But Freeman was genuinely impressed. The girl standing in front of him was at most a teenager. As far as he knew, it was extremely rare for a mage of that age to cast a firewall of that scale. Impressive, sacrificing yourself for your comrades. Humph. Don't talk as if it were a sacrifice. I sent him because I can handle this myself. Really? You look like exhausted. Sorry, but we're also in a hurry, so we can't wait. As soon as Freeman's words fell, his subordinates appeared. The fact that nobody was able to extinguish the fire in the forest was proof that none of them were mages. However, they were all schema users and like Freeman carried weapons, a combat method that mixes schema and magic. On the battlefield, such people are called gunners. Amy had never observed a gunner's combat, but she could guess what it was like. She herself had the ability to use long-range magical skills and schema simultaneously. Freeman's subordinates opened the cylinders and loaded magic projectiles. It seemed that each cylinder could hold at least 6 magic projectiles. A total of 12 magic projectiles could be equipped on both sides, and the number of enemies was 20. Therefore, the cycle to reload the enemy's firepower was 240 magic bullets. I'm sorry, but your immature adventures end here. As soon as Freeman's words fell, his subordinates raised their weapons. Certainly, his subordinates had a different disposition compared to Falcoa. Perhaps due to his leadership, they showed no complacency or arrogance. They were solely focused on eliminating their opponent. Amy chuckled softly. It might have been because Sharon played a significant role in this battle, but she didn't expect such a low assessment of herself. So you're planning a shootout with just 20 people against me? Amy concentrated, putting strength into the lower part of her abdomen, as if she were about to cast a spell. She blew a gust of wind and fist-sized rocks rose around her, igniting with a whistle. This time, you've chosen the wrong opponent. The pupils of Amy's eyes gleamed in a reddish hue. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Tess kept looking back as she ran. She had followed Sharon based on his words, but she felt it was a reckless strategy. Though the gunners were inferior to mages in firepower, they had physical abilities comparable to swordsmen. The idea of Amy fighting among them made her stomach churn. Sharon, shouldn't we go back? I'm worried about Amy. Everything will be fine. If we delay, it will be a disadvantage for us. We might be pursued by forces that survived the first checkpoint. The priority is to quickly reach the hideout somehow. I know, but what about Amy? Wouldn't it have been better for you to deal with the enemies? Sharon, noticing Tess's thoughts, smiled bitterly. Things don't work that way. A mage's ability isn't simply measured by power. It depends on the situation and affinity. When dealing with gunners, Amy will be several times stronger than me. Tess seemed unable to believe it. Of course, she knows Amy is in a higher class, but Sharon's performance when they arrived was truly astonishing. Could there really be a situation where she was several times stronger than Sharon? Is that possible? No matter how excellent each one's skills are, there's the question of numerical superiority. Much like a swordsman, Tess thought, focusing on physical strength. Certainly, the total sum of quantifiable physical strength is an important matter. However, when it comes to magic, the situation changes a bit. For a mage who uses numerous phenomena through a combination of omnipotence and omniscience, the number of enemies isn't as crucial. What matters more is the exceptional calculation ability to induce a situation where their honed abilities reveal optimal efficiency. The properties of photons and flames are different. Also, the four-way zones are different. Amy is a mage specialized in long range because she can maximize the advantage of red eye. If Amy confronts them in her own domain, no matter how strong the enemies are, Sharon spoke confidently. Even if their numbers are large, they won't be able to defeat Amy at all. Tess swallowed hard. Normally, when dealing with Sharon and Amy, she felt like she was looking after her stubborn and immature younger brother. But in actual combat, they were like an icy field, cold and serene. But both of you are truly amazing. How can you be so confident? That's Tess and misunderstanding. Instead, I think Tess is amazing. What about me? After all, you pierced through the fortress and I haven't been of any help. Sharon didn't think that way. After all, the ability of a sword warrior and the mage will surely differ from the start. In mental faculties, individuals who show results that surpass their age often appear, but sword warrior fighters who require physical growth as a backing relatively reveal their prominence later on. Tess and Rian would become stronger in the future, and they would follow their own paths, infusing their individual beliefs into a single sword. Sharon, we've arrived. Emerging from the forest, a sight opened up where the blue sea stretched beyond a paradisiacal cliff. On the eastern side of the cliff, there seemed to be a house made of bricks. That place was probably the hideout. However, to get there, they had to pass through the last gate. The interim leader, Falcoa, was waiting for Sharon and his group. Tess frowned, puzzled. If he was the character he had evaluated, he should have drawn his sword and jumped into the battlefield long ago. What's this? Why is this guy still here? Hehehe, it's much more fun to cause havoc from the beginning. However, we also have circumstances on this side. There were instructions from Marcia. It wasn't a strategy suitable for his temperament, but Falcoa obediently followed, because these were the words of the person who turned someone discarded as evil in society into a battlefield hero. Anyway, you've made it here. The commander was right. The woman you're looking for is in that building. Go in and get her out. Falcoa stepped aside as if to clear their path. However, Sharon and his group couldn't move. A killing intent completely different from what they had seen in the royal palace blocked their way. Tess understood Amy's feelings. In the end, fighting an expert like this also meant they had to take some risks on their part. He's trying to disrupt us. Rian and I will take care of this. Sharon, go and bring Yuna back. Sharon obediently nodded in response to his clear agreement. Tess realized why Amy had smiled. Far from feeling abandoned, it moved her heart. So after all, it's not such a cold world. Is this what it feels like when someone trusts you? With Sharon's ability, escaping alone was not a problem. After briefly looking around, he cast teleportation and his body disappeared in a flash of light. But Volkova didn't even glance at him. From that look, Tess realized he had planned to send Chiron away from the beginning. Why? Well, the commander's orders are there, and besides, I prefer having women nearby. Volkova drew his sword and aimed at Tess. It's clear he's a man of turbulent temperament, but his drunken and staggering appearance had vanished. Without taking his eyes off Volkova, Tess explained the strategy to Rian. He's a scammer user. While I hold him off, you attack. It was possible to guess how outstanding Volkova's skills were just by observing his momentum. Therefore, the way to increase the survival rate was for Tess, the same schema user, to defend herself. That won't work. I hold him off. You focus on attacking. Idiot, how can you hold him off? I hate to say this, but it's impossible for you to stop that guy alone. If it's impossible, then I guess I'll have no choice but to die. What? Tess raised her eyes in disbelief, but Rian was serious. Moreover, he hadn't given up the fight. He was simply fighting his own battle. We'll stay here to defeat him, not to save our own lives. Tess couldn't refute. If you hold him off, we might gain some time. But you know, right? We can't win that way. We'll both end up dead, so I'll hold him off. You focus on attacking. Rian was right. Sharpening the sword and strengthening the shield shouldn't win the battle. In the end, the rule was to sharpen the sword, even if it meant giving up life. End of chapter 153. Chapter 154. The second encounter too. Can you handle it? His schema won't be at the level of cadets. Still, we don't have another choice, right? I have to do it. Rian slowly advanced with the augment symbol, the great sword hanging down from the ground. On the contrary, Tess stepped aside as if to exit Falcoa's line of sight. It was a standard two-person formation, but Falcoa seemed unfazed by it. If he, known as the demon of the battlefield, were to be controlled by these novices, how much would those who lost their lives to his sword mock him? Rian honestly stated, extending his great sword. Come at me, I will accept you. But before he could finish speaking, Falcao was already close. It was an instant acceleration beyond imagination. Kyo ha 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 ha. Rian's nose twitched as he defended against the long sword that was tracked vertically. It wasn't a collision between swords, but rather the impact of a sledgehammer. What's this? Have you already given up? Falcao savagely attacked the great sword. Rian's knees bent with each impact. In the end, he couldn't hold on any longer and placed his knee on the ground. Oh, the muscles of the arm holding the straight sword spasmed. At that moment, Falcoa's kick struck his solar plexus. Rian's body rolled on the ground like a ball. Rian, Tess let out a cry of regret. The situation seemed to have already concluded. However, Contrary to Falcoa's expectations, Rian suddenly stood up. In addition to physical strength that went beyond common sense, tenacity was also one of Rian's strengths. Oh, now I have a general idea. You're at this level, huh? Falco's eyebrows arched. However, Rian didn't stop there. He pointed his great sword straight and taunted his opponent. Fine, the real fight starts now. Come at me as much as you want. Kick, I'll kill you. The corners of Falcoa's mouth were torn up to his ears. He was exactly the same as when he was called the demon of the battlefield. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sharon opened the door and entered the building, inappropriate for a place used by a band of mercenaries. A tidy living room was revealed, with potted plants lined up under the window where the sun shone. Where is G's sister? Sharon went through each room. When he opened the third door, he froze and grabbed the knob. A pleasant fragrance wafted from the room. A red carpet was laid and beds and desks were arranged to a standard. Sharon looked at the woman sitting on the bed. He had only vaguely thought she would be there when he heard Tess speak, but the impact of finding her was immense. Oh, you came, Sharon. Have you been well? Marcia Nuna. Marcia was undoubtedly the leader of the organization that kidnapped Yuna. However, she was smiling, with such a warm face that it was impossible to harbor those thoughts. Did you safely get home that day? Have you reconciled with your friend? Sharon swallowed the response that had stuck in his throat. Marcia seemed to know he would come, but hadn't handed over Yuna. You already know, right? You must have heard everything. Oh, why are you doing this, Sharon? It's scary. Are you angry with this, Nuna? I'm sorry for deceiving you back then. As Marcia coquettishly approached, Sharon withdrew to the same distance. Wow, you really seem angry. What should I do to make you forgive this, Nuna? Should I kneel down and beg here? I'll do it if you want. Please return this sister to me. That's all I ask. Aha, so that's it. Oh my, you should have told me earlier. I misunderstood and thought you were looking for a fight with me. However, kind Sharon wouldn't do such a thing. What a relief. However, kind Sharon wouldn't do such a thing. What a relief. Sharon was confused. Who is this person? He couldn't understand her behavior, as if she were experiencing a different world and situation. Where is Yuna? She's on the second floor. If you want to take her, go ahead. Sharon turned around. He didn't want to think about Marsha anymore. He just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. All right, shouldn't you take some clothes to cover her? Sharon's steps abruptly stopped. When he looked back, Marcia was smiling mischievously. It's a bit uncomfortable to see a stranger naked, right? That's why I'm telling you in advance. Don't be too surprised. She might have gone crazy. My men were too rough. As Sharon's eyes turned colder, Marcia spoke faster. I saw it too, and the screams weren't a joke. Well, I wouldn't have been able to endure it either. Now that I think about it, I think I went too far. But Sharon, you know what? It was all by my order. Even so, I think you'll understand because you're a kind-hearted Chiron, aren't you? Chiron simply kept his mouth shut. That fact brought great joy to Marcia. How do you feel, Chiron? What do you mean? How do I feel? What do you want to hear? Chiron no longer found any value in respecting Marcia, but this seemed to be a delightful event for Marcia. Ho ho ho, do you really seem angry? Why are you angry with me? You said someday my kleptomania would get better, but your thoughts have changed. Now, haven't they? Wouldn't it have been better if you had scolded me harshly back then? Then maybe I wouldn't have kidnapped Yuna. Honestly, you were very unlucky. Sharon turned fully towards her. It wasn't just about Yuna now. Marcia had done something she should never have done. Answer me. How do you feel? Are you about to go crazy? Do you feel miserable because this Nuna you once adored is like this? Do you think there's nothing left to believe in this world? So other feelings. Do you have to hear them from their own mouths to feel relieved? Marcia's laughter stopped when Sharon asked, if you really want it, I can do it. So why do you care about my feelings? Are you afraid I'll be disappointed? Don't be ridiculous. I'm mocking you. Really? Should I tell you what I think of you right now? Marcia's face hardened. She seemed like someone who had been robbed of the option to speak, only waiting for Sharon's response. I don't hate you. You're still a good person in my memories. Marcia's expression changed in real time. Her perplexed face gradually turned into disappointment and finally into anger. Stop talking nonsense. If that's really how you feel, can you forgive me? Can you smile at me as you used to after I trampled G's younger sister? No, you did something you shouldn't have done at all. If you really did that, I'll never forgive you. Haha, don't tell me you think I'm lying. But what should I do? I mean, it's real. Go up and check. Even if it's true, I don't hate you. But Sharon looked at her and bit his lip. Sharon, okay na yan. I'm saddened that you, who know pain better than anyone else, have done something like this. Fire sparked in Marcia's eyes. Her face contorted threateningly, and she gritted her teeth. She wouldn't have felt aggrieved if she had really trampled on Yuna. She couldn't bear it. Sharon, who seemed to know everything about her, was annoying. You really make me angry. Sharon hurriedly stepped back. Marcia's zone, which penetrated with synesthesia, was sharp enough to provoke a tingling sensation, a star-shaped zone. It was a one-way sense only for the offensive type among the four types. Preparing for Marcia's attack, Sharon adopted a defensive stance, but they caught Yuna on the second floor. The terrain was quite difficult for mages. It wasn't just about reducing the radius of the spiritual zone. To put it in a warrior's perspective, it was like throwing away the long sword he used as a main weapon and fighting with a short sword. What kind of magic could she be? Sharon observed Marcia and preemptively released photon magic so he could immediately dodge any attack, but Marcia's magic exceeded Sharon's expectations. When she narrowed her eyes and let out a piercing scream, a loud noise invaded his eardrums. Oh! Sharon was taken aback and stumbled. There was a stab of pain in the as if a needle had pierced through his ear and come out the other side. Sonic cannon. She was a sound mage. This is dangerous. Sound mages are those who study sound, even if it's not a human voice. It vibrates the air to create various sound waves, and the representative attack magic was sonic cannon, demonstrated by Marcia. The sound pressure from the sonic cannon exceeds 150 decibels. It's potent enough to rupture eardrums and induce deafness at close range. Because the magic is directional and amplifies sound wavelength, it doesn't spread wildly like a laser. However, being invisible makes it one of the most challenging magics to counter. I'm at a disadvantage here, just as Sharon and Amy's effectiveness drastically vary depending on the situation and environment. For Marcia, who handles sound, fighting in a confined space was akin to a stroll in a garden. Sharon racked his brain to overcome the current situation. The method he ultimately chose was high-speed teleportation in a narrow space. Blending patrol and rainbow drop, he moved around the room, disrupting Marcia with a complex pattern of flashes. As soon as he had her at a disadvantage, Sharon unleashed photon cannon. However, Marcia effortlessly evaded the magic coming from the blind spot by swiftly rotating her body. How? Unless she had eyes in the back of her head, there was no way to detect an attack from a blind spot. No, even with keen sight, it was impossible to evade the photon cannon from this distance. Heh, surprised, aren't you? Surely that's not all you've got. Could it be Sonar? Well, as someone who graduated from a magic academy, you've been studying a lot, haven't you? Sonar is the ability to read sounds. Originally, its use is maximized only underwater, but mages can materialize their zones in any medium as such as they can, thanks to their omnipotence. It's said that the search capabilities of an expert in sonar far surpass those of a typical radar in terms of density. Therefore, it was natural for her to react simultaneously. As Sharon cast photon cannon, amplification magic is bothersome. It's so dull. Sharon tilted his head. It was a topic that could easily be overlooked, but upon reflection, it was odd. No mage would belittle the magic they master. But this one, I like. If you master sonar, there's no need to amplify sounds. As she extended her arms, the air in front of her vibrated and sound cannons flew from both sides. Sharon quickly cast teleportation. However, the sound was faster than his reflexes. High decibel sound waves steered his brain, and his spell unraveled. For a mage who had to concentrate their mind, sound magic was genuinely perilous. Marsha enveloped the entire building with a sidelong look magic. Like a dolphin, this powerful detection magic fired sound waves and read the echo, allowing her to accurately measure presence, direction, and distance regardless of obstacles. Sharon was cornered. Defending against sound cannons was impossible. Moreover, Marsha easily dodged even the photon cannon thanks to instantaneous side-looking detection. It's really odd. Sound-based magic is highly specialized. How can Marsha, who is a mercenary, wield sound magic? Mages specialized in sound spend their entire lives studying and gathering sound alone. Even if they had innate talent, this was a magic hard to perform without academic knowledge. You have a quite interesting expression. I can clearly see the emotion written all over your face. How can you do this? End of chapter 153. Chapter 155, The Second Encounter 3. When Marsha fired sound cannon again, Sharon pressed both hands against his ears. At this moment, no magic was more effective than covering his ears. Wow! However, Sharon's expectations were not met. A sound cannon of a different power level than he had seen before pierced the back of his hand. If he hadn't covered his ears, it would have burst his eardrums. Ha, you're underestimating me too much. Even if I couldn't attend the academy, I know how to do sequential equations. Marcia might not be a graduate of the Mage Society's Magic Academy, but she's also a veteran who has defeated numerous mages. It's not an exaggeration to say she acquired important theories through experience. Banshee screamed. When Marcia vibrated her spiritual zone, a strange elongated sound filled the room. Sharon jumped to his feet, afraid of the sudden phenomenon. He couldn't see. It was as if the world had darkened, as if ink had spilled over his retina. What is this? What kind of magic is this? Sound mages travel the world collecting various sounds. Among them, the Banshee is a human-made monster that lives in mountainous areas and has a female upper body. It emits unique high-frequency sound to blind its prey and devour it. And Marsha uses sound magic to mimic that frequency. Sharon became anxious. He couldn't determine the opponent's location through the spiritual zone. The narrow space was dizzy, with the reverberation of sound waves, and Marsha was felt only through sound, being the origin of the sound waves, while Sharon's senses were paralyzed. Marsha had already approached him. Then she extended her palm toward Sharon's ear. At this distance, a direct impact from sound cannon would cause his brain functions to cease. Goodbye, Sharon. At that moment, Sharon's spiritual zone vibrated violently. Sensing the crisis through her sonar, Marcia immediately retreated. At the same time, a light ignited and pushed the furniture in the room. With tightly closed eyes, Sharon surrounded himself with lasers. Although firing lasers quickly might not produce a significant impact, Marcia, who had checked his power at the first door, crouched under the desk. Marcia took cover behind Marcia took cover behind the desk and couldn't visually confirm what was in front of her. However, using her sonar, she could clearly feel that Sharon was doing what Sharon was doing. Marcia's heart skipped a beat. Sharon was aiming precisely with photon cannon right in front of her. How was this possible? The resounding cry of the banshee usually doesn't easily disappear in a confined space. Marcia remembered that the lasers had surrounded the room before. Could it be that he cut off the sound, interrupting the vibration of sound waves is not easily achieved through normal magic. However, with high-efficiency energy amplification like lasers, it was possible to cut off the sound waves. Marcia might not have known the principles behind lasers, but Sharon understood the principles of sound, the difference in responsiveness that occurs there. This was the reason why the Magic Academy taught disciples numerous disciplines in addition to their specialties. This, with wide open eyes, Sharon fired photon cannon at Marsha's location. At the same time, Marsha leaped like a flying squirrel and rolled to the side. Kwang! A heavy sphere of light pierced through the building's wall and extended outward. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The battle between the forest resembled a war. It was evident that Freeman's subordinates didn't grasp the value of magic projectiles. They had been recklessly firing their weapons, resulting in the complete destruction of the surrounding area. However, they were the ones cornered. Their numbers, once 20, had now dwindled to 7. Despite this, they couldn't even determine Amy's location. Damn it, where is she? There, she just passed by there. A fiery stone flew from the depths of the forest, striking the nape of a gunman who hadn't had time to turn around, rendering him unconscious, even with his scheme activated. Damn it. She's deliberately using fire element magic. What a ghost. She moves very fast, but her accuracy is tremendous. For a gunman, mobility and accuracy are crucial. Amy was overwhelming with them in both aspects. The reason she could use stable flight magic and have nearly perfect target accuracy was that she owned Red Eye. Now there are 6, no 7, including Freeman. Amy once again levitated rocks around her. Then the rocks turned red hot and it suddenly burst into flames. If there's photon theory in the photon system, there's ignition theory in the fire system, known as ignite. It formed the basis of fire system magic. There were 5 main characteristics of the flames that ignite could create. These were heat, generating heat; flare, igniting fire; burn, setting objects on fire; blaze, burning a wide area; and buster, causing explosions. Hitting rocks with a burn of fire system was a spell called Fire Call, a magic that made rocks burn like molten lava. For a fire mage, burn was important. It compensated for its light weight, the inconvenience of fire. Thus, it was the perfect counterattack against gunmen using schemas. Shall we go again? Amy soared into the sky and ruthlessly launched fire call. Compared to the meteoric bombardment, it might be child's play, but it was terrifying for those on the receiving end. She's up there, shoot at her. The gunmen raised their weapons to the sky and fired magic projectiles, but Amy, adjusting for the error through the memory of her own image, was toying with the enemies in terms of evasion and precision. Anyone could easily learn flight magic, but maintaining balance in a constantly changing atmosphere wasn't easy. However, Amy floated in the sky as if frozen. Her pupils, which were rapidly fluctuating through self-image states, shone red quite quickly. With every projectile exchange, the number of enemies decreased one by one. When only two of Freeman's subordinates remained, Amy unleashed her last fire calls. This time, she didn't even need precise aiming. The burning rocks impaled the heads and backs of the enemies trying to turn and run, and with a dull thud, only then did Amy lift her flight magic and landed in an open field. 20 gunmen were annihilated in an instant. Now only Freeman remained. Your expression hasn't changed in the slightest despite your subordinates being defeated. Are you too ruthless? Or are you a coward? If the fact that I don't like to fight makes me a coward, then perhaps I am. Amy frowned at Freeman's words. If it was a fight, if it was a psychological war, it was very sophisticated, but Freeman didn't care about what people thought. Freeman's coming. Here comes the coward Freeman. If you make Freeman cry, Marshall will come, a pathetic guy who needs a woman's help. Freeman, reminiscing about old memories, said something unexpected. Let's stop. What? What did you just say? Amy was stunned. She had victory within reach, but suddenly he suggested stopping. Moreover, this showed no respect for his subordinates who had risked their lives fighting. I'm worried about the commander. I think I should go see how she is. I don't want to see her fall. Nobody wants to lose. Then you should have lived a good life from the start. That's not what I mean. She shouldn't lose, even if it means dying. What are you talking about? Freeman didn't answer Amy's question. He was just muttering his own story as if talking to himself. The commander is wrong. Your friends might die. Sharon is stronger. He would never lose against a woman like that. You're so pure and kind. It's good to trust in your men, but you'll regret it. Amy, seeming annoyed at being misunderstood as a lover, clenched her fist and shouted, That's funny, and I'm stronger than Sharon. You bastard, I'll never let you go. So you'll have to calm down right here. Is that so? Realizing negotiations had broken down, Freeman took two guns in both hands and activated schema. His figure, which had been facing Amy, became blurry like a secondary image and vanished from sight. Amy couldn't even react, but when she felt his presence behind her through the spiritual zone, she quickly turned her body. Freeman's kick barely grazed her chin. Amy gritted her teeth, finding herself in a tough spot. Darn it, I made a mistake. As an artilleryman, she thought he'd attack from a distance, but he closed in and attempted close combat. His thought process was clearly different from his subordinates, who relied solely on magic projectiles. Humph, I'll take you seriously now. While Amy corrected her sloppy posture, Freeman jumped into the air and fired a barrage of magic projectiles. Explosive fireballs rained down toward Amy like discontinuous lines. However, Amy countered with a swift barrage of flame strikes and neutralizing them all in an infinitely vast coordinate space. Aligning a point with a line is extremely difficult. One could say that the precision of both individuals is on a knife's edge. Back on the ground, the two clashed once more, engaging in a close-range shout-out. But as expected, the gunman had the advantage at close quarters. In that case, Amy unleashed fire mist, a defensive magic. As the hot wind blew, a reddish smoke enveloped the surroundings like a piece of gas. When Freeman moved out of range, Amy unleashed a rapid fire of flame strikes to finish him off. About 10 fire spears were launched forward, scorching the air. Po, 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 po. But this wasn't the end. Using teleportation, she surrounded Freeman unremittingly, unleashing her magic. Just as dozens of flames strikes converged in a single point, Freeman's eyes widened as he activated schema, one of the ocular techniques, compound eye. The landscape Freeman beheld was fragmented as seen through an insect's eyes, receiving individually analyzed information. Freeman's waist swayed back and forth like a willow branch. Continuous flame strikes unfolded, yet they couldn't even graze his clothing and passed in an intersecting pattern following the order of time. Amy sensed this wasn't an ordinary technique, though it was nothing compared to Red Eye. It was clearly a specialized ocular technique for gunners. She changed her strategy and hid in the forest. As long as the opponent was a high-level gunner, she had no chance in close combat. However, Amy had another specialty, sniping. She distanced herself by 300 meters and observed Freeman. She calmly watched him opening the cylinder to reload his magic projectiles. Let's see how long you can stay calm. And Amy transformed her target type spiritual zone into sniper mode. The zone extended in a conical form, aiming directly at Freeman's face. Due to the nature of flame strike, power amplifies as the distance increases. This is because there's an air tunnel which can be considered a feature of wind magic. Utilizing air pressure, the speed of an object can be accelerated while it flies. A flame strike fired from 300 meters away would have nearly 4 times the power of at close range. As Amy cast her magic, the fire spear was absorbed by the air tunnel and headed towards Freeman. At the 200-meter rank, at the 200-meter mark, Amy thought it was all over. Given the current acceleration, the speed to cover the remaining 100 meters would be more than 4 times greater than the first 200 meters. Ultimately, Freeman could never react in time. As expected, Freeman didn't move. However, Amy was surprised. The flame strike had landed far from Freeman. Did I make a mistake? It was then that Amy realized she felt an unusual sensation infiltrating her mind. Anti-magic. It was clear that Freeman's weapon was enchanted with anti-magic. By her estimates, while it might be just a 3% difference at 300 meters, even that small error would be magnified immensely. Anti-magic was dangerous for her. It directly affected her spiritual zone and was a magic she couldn't counter even with her red eyes. End of chapter 155.